Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 5th of July, comes to you from London. And US markets were closed yesterday, of course, for 4th of July, so we'll see not much change on yesterday for quite a lot of things. But the dollar is recovering. So we just see here the dollar just bouncing on the cloud here on the lagging line. We are definitely below in the medium term. But we are just seeing a recovery here in the short term. So maybe we're seeing a reversal, but it's still too hard to say. Of course, we've got a new downside target on this chart here, and that is generating a downside target of 5%, and we've still got this one of 3% hanging over. This one, of course, not yet activated. So the dollar goes lower, then it could go quite a bit lower. But the interesting thing is, at the moment, we are recovering, so it just puts us in a short-term uptrend. Strangely, the euro is also up. But we're seeing here that we are effectively in a downtrend, the reverse of the dollar, and we're seeing here that on the long-term chart we are actually making transition, so more than just hitting resistance as the dollar is hitting support in the index. So euro is still looking quite strong, and this new upside target of 118 activated, so that's 4 or 5% upside. Looking at the Japanese yen, we're seeing here dollar regaining its strength, and long term the dollar is making a transition against the yen. So the dollar yen chart is bullish now on all three time frames, so it is showing dollar strength here. So dollar is weak against the euro but strong against the yen. Looking at sterling, we're seeing that new downtrend as well, just coming through the cloud here, and we are still very bearish below the cloud on the long-term chart. Euro sterling also just turning bearish at the moment. We're just coming back down through the cloud, so bearish on all three time frames at the moment. Euro Swiss, much the same picture, not quite through the cloud on the Swiss franc, interestingly, on the short-term chart. And the Australian dollar, again, not quite through the clouds, so just a mixed picture there. The S&P 500 index was closed, of course, yesterday, so no change there. Still bullish on the medium and long term, but the short term looking bearish. The thing to watch today is the Nasdaq. Very worrying that we're actually below the lows that we'd set a couple of weeks ago. We've got downside targets of 3.5% to 6%, a 4% downside target on the medium-term chart. We've still got this 18% upside target, but it looks like we're going to fall before we rise on the Nasdaq, so more of a sell-off. Also, just potentially a little bit of a head and shoulders there on the Nasdaq. So the height of that head does suggest we could fall quite a bit lower as well. Dow Jones is bullish on all three time frames, but of course the Nasdaq will drag that down if it goes lower, and the Russell 2000, again, the broad market is bullish, but again, watch for a move lower there. The S&P 500 future is up very slightly this morning, but that's no real change, so it's hard to say how that's going to affect things. And the Nasdaq E-mining just slightly down, so no real heads up yet as to which way those markets are going to move. FTSE 100 is up, although we are still bearish below the cloud on the short term. We've got a new upside target of 1.77%, that's 7517 points, back above 7500, but at the moment it's hard to see that happening with this downward pressure, and we haven't yet activated this target either. Looking at the FTSE 250, we are just finding support on the cloud on the lagging line on the medium-term chart, but still bearish on the short-term chart. We have got downside potential of 3 and 5%. The DAX is still bearish as well. It's up this morning by 1/3%, but and maybe finding some support on the cloud. But the medium term is bullish, but the short term is bearish. The Nikkei is mixed in the short term. We're just seeing here that we've been really teetering with the cloud. The medium and long term charts look good. That weaker yen helping the Japanese market. Hang Seng is bearish below the cloud on the short term, but holding on the medium term. And the Shanghai index just on the verge of going through the cloud on the medium-term chart, just breaking to new highs here on the short-term chart. China actually looking good, the local market looking good, and we're seeing upside targets here, 3 upside targets to around 3%. There's a real cluster there, so that's looking pretty strong for the local Chinese market, Shanghai. Looking at the Sensex, the Indian market, it's up very slightly this morning, and we just see here we're still really clearly bullish on the medium term and long term charts. The Australian market just down about 1/3%, and bearish in the medium term. The short term chart, a very mixed picture going on there. Brent crude continues its recovery. We see here the short term recovery. The lower low is still clear though, and at some point we will probably find resistance, maybe around the cloud level, high 40s, before embarking on the next downward leg. We expect that to happen because of this seasonality, the downward pressure in the market. WTI, we also see is recovering quite strongly on the short term, but again, that seasonality will probably weigh heavily as we enter the second half of the year. US nat gas just nudging this $3 mark, but still bearish below the cloud and just struggling in the short term. And if we look at copper, we see here a recovery as well. Going straight to gold, gold is still on the downward path. We're seeing here bearish in the medium term, bearish in the short term below the cloud. We've got targets to 12.12, 12.18. We're nearly at that level, and we're just seeing here that the any upside targets here are potentially being unwound. We do still have a transition though, and it's hard to call gold right now, but it is looking still quite bullish in the medium term, but the short term and long medium term charts are worrying. And if we look at silver, much the same thing, hitting the floor here, making this lower low on the medium term chart. That's not great for silver, and we are making a long term transition down there as well. Taking a look at US Treasury yields, 2.35%. So we are just making a transition on that medium term chart, looking more and more bullish. Tech stocks, of course, no change since we looked at them yesterday. Apple still holding its lows from June, so that's looking better than the market. Google is the worry. Google is actually the worrying chart, down 6% at the moment, potentially on the short term. So keep an eye on Google. That is looking like the most worrying chart. Amazon also a worry, but not quite hitting its lows. Facebook the same, holding up. And Microsoft also looking like Google, just a bit lower. So watch today for movement in Google and Microsoft shares. Lower still will drag the Nasdaq down. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.